For over a century, you've been told this massive lie about your personality.
A really persistent lie, honestly.
Right. If you're the oldest child, you've been told, well, you're a natural boss. You're pre-programmed for leadership and responsibility.
And if you're the youngest, you get the rebel label. The wild, creative, free spirit who just fundamentally operates outside the rules.
Exactly. And I mean, if you happen to be in the middle, well, you're the eternal peacemaker, just cursed to forever mediate everyone else's disputes.
We treat these labels like gravity, like they're just absolute laws of nature.
We really do. But today, we are diving into massive, population-level data sets that prove birth order personalities are, well, a complete scientific myth.
Yeah, we're dealing with what researchers actually call a zombie theory.
A zombie theory.
Yeah, an idea that has been mathematically disproven over and over, yet it just absolutely refuses to die in popular culture.
Wow. Okay, so today we are doing a deep dive into a stack of landmark research that essentially, rewrites family psychology.
Spot on. We're looking at the 2015 findings from Damien and Roberts.
Right, and also those massive multinational data sets that were analyzed by Rohrer, Egloff, and Schmuckel around that same year, right?
Yes, and we'll cap it off with a really fascinating 2018 study by Black, Grunfist, and Eckert.
So our mission here, just to be clear, is not to look at, small anecdotal observations of a couple kids playing in a lab.
No, not at all. We are dissecting data drawn from literally millions of individuals. The goal is to strip away all our ingrained biases and figure out what is actually, mathematically real about sibling dynamics.
And the stakes here are actually surprisingly high. I mean, if we fundamentally misunderstand how birth order works, we're misjudging our kids.
We're misinterpreting our siblings, too.
Yeah, and we are likely misjudging ourselves. So throughout this deep dive, you are going to rethink the origin of, every argument you've ever had with your family.
We're also going to reveal the single, incredibly specific cognitive advantage that firstborns actually get.
Oh, the firstborns are going to love that.
They are, but we'll also explain why it simultaneously matters.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really matter at all in the real world.
Right, and most importantly, we're going to examine this massive paradox. If birth order doesn't change your innate personality, how does it somehow dictate whether you end up as, say, a corporate executive or an independent freelancer?
It's wild, but to understand how we got everything so wrong, we really have to start at the beginning.
So where did this rigid categorization of siblings actually come from? Who started this?
Well, to understand the persistence of the myth, we have to trace it way back to the early 20th century, specifically to this Austrian psychotherapist named Alfred Adler.
Okay, Adler. So what was his deal?
Adler was actually a contemporary of Sigmund Freud, and he introduced this idea that family position is the primary driver of your personality development.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he coined this concept of dethronement.
Dethronement. That sounds incredibly dramatic.
It is. His theory was that, the firstborn child starts life getting a total monopoly on parental attention. They are the center of the universe.
Right, they get everything.
Exactly. Then the second child arrives. And according to Adler, the firstborn experiences this, profound psychological trauma of being dethroned.
Like a deposed medieval king or something.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
So to cope with that loss of status, Adler argued the firstborn becomes really conservative, authority-respecting, and highly responsible.
Oh, I see. They're basically trying to win back the parents' favor by just rigidly aligning with all their rules.
You nailed it. That was his premise.
It's funny because dethronement makes a 2-year-old sound so Machiavellian. But I can totally see why the public latched onto it. I mean, it provides a very cinematic explanation for everyday sibling rivalry.
It's deeply narrative-driven.
Yeah.
Humans love a good story. And Adler went on to categorize the youngest child, too. He said they have many parents, in the form of all their older siblings.
Because the older siblings are basically helping raise them.
Right. Which supposedly leads the youngest to become pampered, manipulative, and ultimately rebellious.
And for decades, this was just accepted as foundational psychology.
It was. Later researchers even doubled down on it. Like Frank Sulloway in the 90s, he tried to apply evolutionary biology to it.
Oh, really? How did that work?
He argued that siblings basically carve out different family niches to compete for parental resources, like baby birds in a nest.
That makes a kind of intuitive sense, I guess.
It does, but modern researchers, specifically Damien and Roberts in their 2015 analysis, they pointed out a catastrophic methodological flaw in all these historical observations.
Ah, here we go. The flaw.
Yeah. Adler and the others were basically basing their theories on a profound optical illusion. something researchers call the age confound.
The age confound. Okay, let's unpack that. Because when I first read the Damien and Roberts paper, this felt like the absolute linchpin of the whole illusion. How does the age confound actively trick us into seeing personality traits that, well, aren't actually there?
It basically comes down to a failure to separate a temporary developmental stage from a permanent character trait.
Okay, so confusing age with personality.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When we observe sibling dynamics, and more importantly, when we form those core childhood memories of our own siblings, we genuinely believe we are observing innate personality.
Right, because that's our reality at the time.
But in reality, we are almost always just observing the natural milestones of human development. Let's look at a specific example highlighted by the researchers. Think about comparing a 10-year-old child to a 6-year-old child in the exact same household.
Yeah, there's a massive cognitive gulf between those two ages.
An enormous gulf. If a parent asks both kids to, say, clean the kitchen, or to manage some complex social interaction, or just regulate their emotions during a stressful
The
event.
10-year-old is obviously going to appear significantly more responsible and organized.
Right. But that is not because they have a quote-unquote firstborn personality. It is because they have literally been alive almost twice as long.
That's such a simple but crazy realization.
Their prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for executive function and impulse control, it's 4 years more mature. They've had thousands of extra hours of language acquisition, physical coordination, social modeling.
I was actually thinking about this while reading the source material, and it struck me that evaluating kids this way is like observing a high school senior and a high school freshman.
I like a comparison.
Right. Like if you put them both behind the wheel of a car, the senior is obviously going to be the better, more cautious driver. But you wouldn't conclude that the senior just has a naturally superior innate driving personality.
No, you definitely wouldn't.
You would acknowledge the incredibly obvious fact that they've possessed their driver's license for 3 years while the freshmen, just got their learner's permit. We are looking at a chronological head start and mislabeling it as a personality type.
That analogy captures the mechanics of the illusion perfectly. Though, I would add one layer of complexity to it.
Okay, what's that?
It's not just a matter of accumulated experience. It's about active neurological capability at any given snapshot in time. And the problem is that this snapshot, this age, confounded, it repeats every single day of your formative years.
Oh, right. Because tomorrow, the older sibling is still older.
Exactly. Day after day, the older sibling is always older. They're always functionally more capable in that exact moment.
Yeah.
Therefore, your brain crystallizes that dynamic.
So the younger sibling internalizes this feeling of being less capable and more chaotic.
Yes, and the older sibling internalizes the feeling of being the primary manager. It gets baked into their self-perception.
Which perfectly explains why Damien and Roberts label this as zombie theory. The science behind it is entirely dead, but it just keeps walking around in our culture.
Yeah, it's a great term for it.
But if the logic of the age confound is so mathematically sound, why does society actively refuse to let the myth go? I mean, why do we hold on to this so tightly?
Well, it's really a testament to how human beings process evidence. Specifically, our reliance on the availability heuristic.
The availability heuristic, meaning we trust what's easy to remember.
Pretty much. We weigh our own vivid anecdotal memories far heavier than we weigh abstract statistics. Your memories of your childhood, they feel absolute.
Yeah, you remember your older sister bossing you around when you were 6 and she was 10?
Right, and that memory is emotionally charged. It's deeply ingrained in your neural pathways.
Yeah.
It is incredibly difficult for a human to overwrite a visceral lived experience with, a spreadsheet of data.
That makes total sense. Data is cold, but my memory of my brother stealing my toys is very hot.
Exactly. Furthermore, even when we become adults and the developmental gap essentially vanishes, like when you are 40 and your sibling is 44, the cognitive difference is basically zero.
Right, you're both just adults.
But we still habitually view each other through the lens of those childhood power dynamics. We cling to the myth because abandoning it requires us to fundamentally reevaluate our own core memories.
That creates a really fascinating pivot point for us. If our childhood memories are just distorted snapshots of temporary developmental stages, what happens when researchers finally eliminate that age confound entirely?
That's where things get really interesting.
Like, if you strip away the chronological head start and examine purely adult personality data, where everyone's prefrontal cortex is fully baked, what remains?
That is precisely the question that Rohr, Egloff, and Schmuckel sought to answer in their landmark 2015 study.
Okay, let's get into the Roar study.
They recognized that past observational studies were flawed by this age gap, so they utilized massive multinational data sets. We're talking about panels from the United States, Great Britain, and Germany.
So this wasn't just a small sample size.
Not at all. Longitudinal data tracking over 20,000 individuals. And to measure personality objectively, they utilized the absolute gold standard in psychological research.
The Big Five personality taxonomy.
Exactly.
Hmm.
The Big Five.
Now, before we reveal the results of that massive data crunch, we need to clearly define the Big Five. Because the pop psychology books have fed us very specific predictions for decades, right? Let's establish exactly what traits are being measured and what the old myths claim about them.
Good idea. So the Big Five represent the broad, universally accepted domains used to describe human personality. You can usually remember them with the acronym OCEAN.
OCEAN. Okay, let's run through them.
First is O, openness to experience, or imagination. This is how curious, inventive, and willing to try new things you are.
And the myth predicts what for that one?
The myth predicts that youngest children, the supposed rebels, will score the highest here.
Okay, what's next?
C is conscientiousness. That's how organized, dependable, and disciplined you are. And the myth heavily predicts that firstborns will dominate this category.
Right, the classic type A oldest child trope. The rule followers.
Exactly. Then E is extroversion. That's how outgoing, energetic, and socially dominant you are. The myth often assigns this to the attention-seeking youngest child. Makes sense. Then A. A is agreeableness. How cooperative, compassionate, and friendly you are. Pop psychology historically assigns this to the middle child. You know, the eternal peacemaker, just trying to keep everyone happy.
Always compromising. And the last one, N.
N is neuroticism, or emotional stability. How well you handle stress, anxiety, and negative emotions.
Okay, so that's ocean. Openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism. I have a methodological question, though, before we look at the results.
Sure.
I was looking at the Rohr study design, and it seems like family size and socioeconomic status could heavily skew this data. Did the researchers control for those variables? Because measuring a firstborn in a wealthy family of 2 kids has to be fundamentally different from measuring a firstborn in a low-income family of, like, 8 kids.
That is a crucial methodological point, and honestly, it's why older studies failed so badly. Older studies often used a between-family design.
Meaning they compared people from completely different families.
Right. They would compare a firstborn from family A to a youngest child from family B. But that introduces massive statistical noise. Things like wealth, genetics, neighborhood environment, parental education.
Yeah, that seems like a huge oversight.
It was. So Rohr and his team utilized a within-family design. They compared siblings raised in the exact same household by the exact same parents.
Oh, that's smart.
Yeah, and they controlled for family size, age, and sibling gender. They isolated birth order as the sole independent variable.
That is incredibly rigorous. Okay, so they have this airtight methodology. They have 20,000 adults, and they are testing the core pillars of human personality. What did the data actually show?
It showed what statisticians refer to as consistently null effect.
Null effect, so like a flat line.
A complete statistical flatline. When you isolate the variables and look at fully developed adults, birth order has absolutely zero lasting impact on any of the Big Five traits.
Wait, zero.
Zero. Firstborns are not mathematically more conscientious or emotionally stable. Youngest children are not more imaginative or extroverted.
And the middle kids.
Middle children are not more agreeable. The entire premise was completely wiped out by the data. The correlation between the order of your birth and your core personality traits is functionally zero.
I have to admit, even knowing the data is coming, I feel an internal resistance to this.
It's hard to let go of.
It really is. I mean, I'm sure we have listeners who are the youngest in their family who pride themselves on being the creative, chaotic, free spirit, and they are probably yelling at their speakers right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Or they're responsible firstborns who feel they carry the weight of their family's organization. It is deeply jarring to be told that millions of data points invalidate the core narrative of your identity.
Yeah, it really shakes up your self-image.
So if it's not birth order, where are these traits actually coming from?
Well, the resistance you're feeling is completely normal. It's the cognitive dissonance of losing a very convenient framework. But to answer your question, the development of your core personality is vastly more complex than just your assigned birth slot.
So what's the driving force then?
Behavioral genetics play a massive role. You inherit a baseline temperament from your parents. Beyond that, it is shaped by your unique peer groups, individual traumas, triumphs, and highly specific microenvironments.
So it's nature and nurture, but specific nurture.
Right. You might be highly conscientious, but that is because of your unique genetic makeup and specific life experiences, not simply because you were the first one to exit the womb.
This is a heavy realization, but, the more you examine it, the more liberating it actually becomes.
I think so too.
It means your personality belongs entirely to you. You are not a predetermined byproduct of parental timing. You aren't doomed to be the rigid rule follower just because you arrived first.
And you aren't destined to be the flaky rebel just because you arrived last.
Exactly. You are essentially a blank slate regarding your birth position.
It is profoundly freeing. It returns agency to the individual. You aren't playing a pre-written part in some generational script. Your personality is your own autonomous construct.
Okay, so the personality myth is comprehensively busted. The Big Five wipeout is clear. But this leaves a massive void.
What do you mean?
Is literally everything a myth? Are siblings just totally randomized clones on paper, or is there any actual scientifically measurable difference between siblings based purely on their birth order?
This brings us to a vital caveat in the research. There is one specific area, just one, where birth order actually produces a measurable scientific difference across populations.
Okay, what is it?
It's cognitive ability, or intelligence.
I knew it. Every firstborn listening just paused the audio to gloat.
Probably.
Let's examine this closely. What exactly did the data reveal about intelligence?
According to the very same 2015 study by Rohrer and colleagues, the same one that wiped out the personality myth's firstborns do reliably score slightly higher on objectively measured intelligence tests.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and also on self-reported intellect. This was a consistent, replicable finding across those massive multinational panels.
That creates a massive contradiction, though, doesn't it?
How so?
Well, if they aren't naturally more conscientious or inherently more focused or more open to learning new experiences, why are they consistently scoring higher on intelligence tests? What is the actual mechanism driving that?
Psychologists generally point to what's called the resource dilution model or the confluence model.
Resource dilution, that sounds like an economics term.
It kind of is, but for parenting. It fundamentally comes down to the concentration of parental resources, specifically undivided attention and linguistic exposure.
Okay, walk me through that.
Consider the developmental environment of a firstborn for the first 2 to 3 years of their life. They are the sole focus of 2 fully developed adult brains.
Right.
They do not have to share cognitive resources. When they are learning to speak, they are engaged in vocabulary modeling directly with adults, uninterrupted. The complexity of the language spoken to them is just inherently higher.
That makes intuitive sense, because when the second child is born, the parental attention is instantly divided by 2. And perhaps more importantly, the second child's linguistic environment isn't just adult-level vocabulary anymore. A huge percentage of their daily interaction is with a 3-year-old older sibling who is, speaking in toddler-level sentences.
That's a huge factor. The pure concentration of the educational environment is diluted. The firstborn experiences a temporary monopoly on the family's intellectual capital.
Wow. A monopoly on intellectual capital.
However, before anyone starts updating their resume to highlight their firstborn status, we urgently need to contextualize the scale of this finding.
Okay. The catch.
Yes. This is where statistical data can be dangerously misleading if it's not explained with absolute precision.
Let's ground this in reality then. How big is this measured intelligence gap?
The researchers quantified the gap, and the difference amounts to roughly 1/10 the standard deviation.
Okay, for those of us who haven't taken advanced statistics recently, please translate 1/10 of a standard deviation into tangible IQ points.
Sure, it translates to roughly 1, perhaps 1.5 IQ points.
1 IQ point?
Yep, 1 point.
Okay, so mathematically it exists, but practically it's microscopic. It's like taking a giant 50-gallon bucket of water and dropping a single extra tear into it. Technically, yes, a scientist with a precision scale can measure that the firstborn's bucket has more mass.
Right.
But if you asked me to carry both buckets, or if I observed them side by side, I would never, ever be able to perceive the difference.
I wouldn't just say it's microscopic. I would argue it is functionally irrelevant on an individual level.
Functionally irrelevant.
Yes. Damien and Roberts emphasize this heavily in their analysis. This 1/10 of a standard deviation is only statistically significant on a population-wide level.
Meaning you need millions of people to even see it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you aggregate a million firstborns and a million youngest siblings, the math reveals the extra drop of water. But in everyday life, is totally invisible.
You cannot attend a dinner party and identify the firstborns based on their intellectual prowess.
No, you absolutely cannot. And think about it this way. If you and your sibling take an aptitude test on the same day, the variance caused by like how much sleep you got the night before, or how much caffeine you consumed that morning.
That's going to swing the score way more than 1 point.
Exactly. That will have a vastly larger impact on your score than your birth order ever will.
So synthesizing the rigorous data we have covered so far, our core Big Five personality traits are functionally identical regardless of birth order.
Right.
And the one measurable difference, intelligence, is a statistical ghost, so vanishingly small that it practically doesn't exist in the real world.
Yes, on paper, there is no meaningful divergence between the oldest and the youngest.
But this leads me to the most perplexing part of our deep dive.
Let's hear it.
If we are so incredibly similar on paper, why do our adult lives often diverge so drastically? Because anecdotally, we all know families where the oldest sibling is like a corporate vice president, and the youngest sibling is a freelance graphic designer. If innate personality isn't driving that, and intelligence isn't driving that, what is?
This is where the research becomes truly fascinating. We have to move beyond internal traits and start looking at external outcomes.
Okay, so what's the study here?
We turn to the 2018 study by Black, Grunfist, and Eckert. They investigated the mystery of occupational sorting.
Occupational sorting. So what jobs people end up in?
Right, and they utilized incredibly comprehensive Swedish registry data looking at the entire population.
Oh, wow, the whole population.
Yeah, Swedish data tracking is incredible. They analyzed career paths alongside what they termed non-cognitive abilities, and the data revealed a staggering divergence.
Okay, lay it on me.
Firstborn children are significantly more likely to become managers. We're talking executives, team supervisors, people operating at the top of established hierarchies.
And the later-born children, what was their dominant sorting path?
Later-born children, and particularly youngest children, are far more likely to become self-employed.
Really?
Yeah. They become independent contractors, entrepreneurs, and freelancers who operate entirely outside of traditional corporate structures.
Wait, before we examine why that happens, what exactly does the Black study mean by non-cognitive abilities? Are we talking about soft skills?
Yes, precisely. Non-cognitive abilities refer to behavioral traits and social skills. Things like social adaptability, risk tolerance, persistence, and leadership behaviors.
Got it.
The researchers found that while innate personality of the Big Five doesn't change based on birth order, the application of these non-cognitive skills shifts dramatically based on the environment.
That creates a wild paradox. If their innate personalities, their conscientiousness or their extroversion, are identical, how does this career divide manifest? Are they being subconsciously sorted by society?
Not by society at large, no, but by the micro-society of their own home.
Okay, explain that.
Black and her colleagues concluded that birth order deeply influences your professional environment because it dictates your early childhood social environment.
So the family home is the training ground.
Exactly. They attribute this occupational sorting to postnatal environmental factors within the family dynamic. Essentially, the family home operates as a subconscious vocational training ground.
So even if a firstborn doesn't possess a biologically innate managerial personality, they are simply thrust into a management role by default, like they are constantly delegated authority by the parents.
Yes, exactly. Picture two siblings with identical baseline personality profiles. Because of the age gap we discussed earlier, the family system places entirely different demands on them.
Right.
The parents constantly tell the oldest, watch your brother while I take this call, or make sure your sister finishes her dinner.
Oh, I see. The firstborn is repeatedly, daily, placed into a position of administrative authority.
Precisely. They are forced to practice organizing others, enforcing established rules, and operating within a clear hierarchy. They basically act as middle management between the executive parents and the junior siblings.
That is a profound realization. They are literally practicing for corporate management for 18 years.
Yes, they are.
Meanwhile, the younger sibling is at the absolute bottom of that family hierarchy. They are perpetually being managed ordered around by people who are just slightly older and slightly bigger than them.
Right.
So do younger siblings gravitate towards self-employment because they are fundamentally exhausted by being managed? Like, do they learn to work outside the system because they can never win within the system?
That is the exact psychological mechanism at play. The younger sibling learns very early on that they cannot win a head-to-head power struggle within the established hierarchy.
Because the older sibling is just physically larger.
Physically larger, verbally more advanced, and backed by parental authority. Therefore, the younger sibling must adapt. They learn to find loopholes. They learn to entertain themselves independently. They develop high-level skills in autonomy and subversion. They exercise the behavioral muscles required to navigate around established authority rather than wielding it.
So the oldest sibling learns how to maintain the system, and the youngest learns how to circumvent the system.
Exactly. Fast forward 20 years. The firstborn walks into a traditional corporate office, sees a rigid hierarchical structure with clear rules and subordinates, and their brain instantly says, I recognize this ecosystem. I have the exact skill set to thrive here.
And they naturally ascend to management.
Yes, and the younger sibling looks at that exact same corporate hierarchy, sees the layers of middle management, and their brain says, absolutely not.
I spent my entire childhood at the bottom of a hierarchy like this, and I refuse to do it again.
Bingo. They crave autonomy and independence, so they become a freelancer or an entrepreneur. The career divergence perfectly mirrors their childhood training ground.
It's wild. It is not because of who they are fundamentally, genetically, or personality-wise, but entirely because of the specific behavioral routines they were forced to practice while growing up.
Exactly. It's behavior, not essence.
This completely shifts my perspective on professional development. It's brilliant. But it also leads us to the ultimate question of application. We have dissected a massive stack of academic literature today.
We have.
We have mathematically destroyed the Adlerian personality myth. We have contextualized the microscopic intelligence gap. And we have decoded the mystery of occupational sorting.
Right.
So how can a listener take all of this data and actively apply it to their own life? How does this change the way we raise our children or, the way we interact with our siblings at the next family gathering?
Moving from the abstract data to the living room is where this research becomes incredibly valuable. The sources we've examined point toward three major actionable takeaways that can fundamentally repair and elevate family dynamics.
Let's go through them. What's the first takeaway?
The first takeaway circles right back to the root of the illusion. Acknowledge the age gap and stop labeling behavior as personality.
Right. We have to stop blaming innate character when the culprit is just biological development.
Exactly. If you are a parent or an older sibling, you must stop attributing a 7-year-old's immaturity or their lack of focus or their emotional volatility to the fact that they are the baby of the family.
Because it's not their identity.
Right. They are not throwing a tantrum because it is their permanent innate identity as the youngest child. They are throwing a tantrum because their prefrontal cortex is 7 years old, and they literally lack emotional regulation.
We must separate the temporary developmental stage from the permanent individual.
Exactly. When we recognize that challenging behavior is usually just a byproduct of age, we can stop unfairly labeling kids with permanent tags that they will end up carrying into adulthood.
Which flows directly into the second takeaway. And this is where I think the ROAR data offers a massive psychological relief. Release the expectations. We really need to unlearn the roles we've been assigned.
The psychological friction of unlearning these roles cannot be overstated. For decades, firstborns have internalized the message that they must be the standard bearers, the responsible ones who never drop the ball.
The pressure must be immense.
It is. But the data mathematically proves they do not need to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. There is nothing in their DNA or their innate personality profile that makes them more capable of handling extreme stress than their younger siblings.
And conversely, later borns are not inherently less responsible or less capable of leadership.
Precisely.
But unlearning that is really hard. Think about the Thanksgiving table problem.
The Thanksgiving table problem.
Yeah, you have a 40-year-old middle child who returns home for the holidays. For 40 years, they've been told their personality is the agreeable peacemaker.
Right, right.
Even if they're a cutthroat lawyer in their professional life, the moment they sit at that table, the family forces them back into the role of mediating disputes between the oldest and youngest.
That is a perfect example.
And if that 40-year-old finally says, no, I am not mediating this, that isn't who I am, it creates immense friction in the family system.
It creates friction because You are breaking the established script. But breaking that script is absolutely essential for mental health.
So we have to push through the friction.
Yes, it's about letting go of damaging self-fulfilling prophecies. If you tell a middle child their entire life that they are the agreeable one, they will subconsciously suppress their own boundaries, their own anger, and their own needs just to maintain the role you forced upon them.
We're forcing multidimensional human beings into flat, one-dimensional caricatures.
Exactly. The data gives us permission to drop the act.
Which brings us to the third and final actionable takeaway, drawn directly from the Swedish occupational sorting data from Black and her colleagues. Actively manage the environment.
Right. If the family home is a subconscious training ground for our future careers, we cannot just let it run on default settings.
Because the default settings just reinforce the hierarchy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We now know that career sorting, who becomes a leader, who learns autonomy, is driven heavily by the microenvironment of chores, responsibilities, and delegated authority. So parents need to consciously disrupt those default patterns.
How do you practically disrupt a default dynamic that is based on physical age and size, though?
By rotating responsibilities. Parents should focus on fostering leadership and independence equally across all children, regardless of their birth order.
So don't just rely on the oldest.
Right. Do not always make the oldest child responsible for watching the youngest.
Yeah.
Give the youngest child a chance to be in charge of a family project or to dictate the rules of a game.
Give them some authority.
Yes. And conversely, allow the oldest child the freedom to fail or to operate outside of a rigid set of expectations without being reprimanded for not being quote-unquote responsible enough.
You have to exercise all the behavioral muscles in all the children.
Precisely. You have to mix it up.
By actively removing these rigid boxes we put ourselves and our families into, we actually allow people to exist as their authentic, complex selves. You get to be uniquely you, not just a generic firstborn or youngest.
It fundamentally repairs relationships. It allows you to look across the table at your sibling and see an equal, fully realized adult, rather than the 10-year-old or the 6-year-old they used to be when the age confound was in full effect.
What an incredible paradigm-shifting journey this has been. We started by debunking Alfred Adler's century-old assumptions about dethronement and personality niches.
We did.
We survived the absolute statistical wipeout of the big five personality traits, realizing our core selves are totally unaffected by when our parents had us.
Such a clean slate.
We analyzed the intelligence caveat, determining that a tenth of a standard deviation is just a drop in a bucket that simply doesn't matter in the real world.
Functionally irrelevant.
And finally, we uncovered the subconscious training ground of our family environments, discovering how delegated authority and subversion ultimately shape whether we become managers or freelancers.
It forces us to meticulously reevaluate the stories we have been telling ourselves for our entire lives. The data is clear, but, changing our minds is the real challenge.
It really is. And on that note, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final lingering question to mull over, something to deeply consider the next time you are interacting with your family, or even just reflecting on your own career choices.
It's a big one.
If